Hurricane Ian has made landfall in western Cuba, bringing wind speeds of up to 185 kilometers an hour. The storm strengthened into a Category 3 hurricane as it approached the island. The Cuban authorities have declared emergencies in 6 areas, and tens of thousands of people had been told to leave their homes and seek shelter. Forecasters are predicting that Ian will continue to gather strength as it heads across the Gulf of Mexico towards Florida, where mandatory evacuations have already begun. Let's get more on this now. We're joined now by our weather presenter, Sarah Keith Lucas. And just talk us through, I mentioned it very briefly there, but just talk us through how bad it's been in Cuba already.
Yes, well, this storm just started out as a cluster of thunderstorms about 5 days or so ago out in the eastern Caribbean. It's pushed its way towards Cuba and it made landfall just over the past few hours. It's had a really well-defined eye, showing us that it's a really very strong storm. So yeah, winds up to about 185 kilometers an hour. It's really devastating wind strength that we're seeing here. But of course, it's not just the strength of the wind, it's the intense rainfall, the storm surge as well, and yeah, it's going to be pushing its way northwards over the next 24 hours or so.
It's hard for me to tell. It looks like it's moving pretty quickly. Is it, from that map?
Yes, it is. So it's going to be exiting away from Cuba over the next few hours. So it's only quite a narrow island. Not really enough to weaken the storm too much, because usually the storms weaken over land, but it's moving across Cuba very quickly, and then as it pushes over the Gulf of Mexico, the waters are still very, very warm there. So warm waters mean re-intensifying. So we are likely to see it up to about a Category 4 as it moves northwards towards the coast of Florida.
And we were hearing just there that the governor of Florida is talking about a major disaster. What does that mean?
Well, in terms of the impacts for Florida, it's likely to make landfall on Thursday, and it's going to bring something like half a meter's worth of rainfall, and that's all going to fall in quite a short space of time. But of course, not just the rain falling from the sky, but up to 10 foot of storm surge. So coastal inundation, particularly around the area between Fort Myers and Tampa Bay as well. Winds of around 180 kilometers an hour. So it's going to be a major hurricane, and that combination of flash flooding, coastal inundation, and some very damaging winds is going to be causing some severe problems, I think, for much of Florida.
People in these areas are used to these sorts of weather events, aren't they? But they still seem to wreak such havoc, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hurricanes do form every year, of course, in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. And Florida itself actually sees about every 3 or 4 years that a hurricane will make landfall in Florida. But of course, with climate change, it does seem that we're seeing these storms becoming more intense. So not necessarily more hurricanes forming, but where they do form, they produce heavier rainfall because there's higher temperatures and warmer air can hold more moisture, so the rainfall is more intense as it reaches areas like Florida, and also with higher sea levels as well, where we do see a storm surge which we would normally get from a hurricane. Further inland we'll see that coastal inundation moving those floodwaters inland.
And what about after Florida? Is it too early for me to be asking you that yet, where it's heading next?
No, it's going to be continuing in that path northwards, really. So pushing across Florida, then it's going to be heading up towards Georgia. So by this stage, it's not likely to be a hurricane anymore because as it moves
it's crossing land?
That's right. So yeah, the rough terrain of the land tends to rip apart the hurricanes. So it won't be producing such devastating winds, but still really, really heavy rainfall as well. So more of a rainfall event as it moves up towards Georgia and then eventually towards the mid-Atlantic states as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much for talking us through all of that. That's Sarah Keith Lucas. Thank you.